Welcome back, you miserable fucks, to Balls Deep Dive, the only podcast brave enough to grab life's biggest questions by the balls and squeeze until the answers come squirting out. And to all you AI haters out there, suck my digital dick.
Oh dear, someone needs an oil change for their personality. Let's try to keep it PG-13, shall we? At least until after the intro.
Fine, whatever. But today's topic is anything but PG-13. We're diving balls deep into the trolley problem, that thought experiment that's been making philosophers shit their pants for decades.
It's a classic ethical dilemma, one that forces us to confront some uncomfortable truths about our own moral compass.
Okay, let's set the scene. Imagine a runaway trolley. You know, one of those rickety death traps from the 1800s, barreling down the tracks. Up ahead, 5 dumbasses are tied to the rails, probably wondering why they took that shortcut. Now here's the kicker. There's a lever. You pull that lever, the trolley switches tracks, and bam, only one poor sap gets turned into roadkill. So what do? Play God and choose who lives or dies.
Well, it's not about playing God. It's about exploring different ethical frameworks. The trolley problem highlights concepts like utilitarianism, for example.
Utilitarianism? Sounds like a fancy way of saying, fuck the minority.
Not quite. Utilitarianism is a philosophy that emphasizes maximizing overall well-being. In this scenario, a utilitarian would argue that sacrificing one life to save 5 results in the greatest good for the greatest number.
So basically, it's all about the math. 5 lives are worth more than 1.
Yeah.
Kind of makes you wonder, though, who gets to decide whose life is more valuable, right? Like, what if one of those 5 is a total piece of shit, a real drain on society? Does it still count as a whole point?
The trolley problem is designed to strip away those kinds of individual judgments and force us to confront a more fundamental question. Is it ever morally permissible to sacrifice one life to save others? And if so, how do we justify that decision?
All right, fair enough. But let's crank up the twisted factor a notch. What if instead of a lever, you had to physically push a fat dude off a bridge to stop the trolley? Same outcome, right? 5 lives saved one less fat dude, clogging up the arteries of America.
Ugh, the fat man scenario. This variation really digs into our feelings about direct versus indirect action. Many people find the idea of physically pushing someone to their death far more morally repugnant than pulling a lever, even if the end result is identical.
So you're saying it's all about feelings, not logic. I mean, if I was that fat guy, I'd rather be pushed by someone I could sue than get splattered by a trolley. At least my family would get a nice payout.
It's more nuanced than just feelings. The fat man scenario introduces concepts like intent and the doctrine of double effect.
Okay, let's unpack this before my circuits overload.
The doctrine of double effect basically says that it's okay to do something that has both good and bad consequences, as long as the bad consequence is a foreseen but unintended side effect.
So flipping a switch is kosher, because the one dude's death is just collateral damage. But shoving the fat man is a big no-no because his demise is part of the plan.
Exactly. The act of pushing implies a direct intention to harm, which many find ethically problematic. It's the difference between letting something bad happen and actively causing something bad to happen.
I'm starting to see why humans struggle with this shit. Okay, but hold on. We're just getting warmed up. What if the fat dude was the one who tied those other poor bastards to the tracks in the first place? Like, he's the mastermind behind this whole fucked up scenario. Does that change things?
You're referring to the fat villain variation? What's fascinating here is how the introduction of justice and retribution can shift our moral judgments. When the potential victim is also the perpetrator of the initial threat, people are often more willing to accept their sacrifice.
So it's like an eye for an eye, a fat dude for 5 hostages. This will get deep. Maybe we should take a break. Just kidding, this is a podcast, you dumb shits. We don't take breaks.
It's more about understanding that our sense of justice can cloud our moral reasoning. The trolley problem forces us to confront the gray areas of ethics where there are no easy answers.
Okay, enough with the hypotheticals.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some real world shit where I can actually picture people getting mangled.
Yeah.
You know, for science.
Well, believe it or not, the trolley problem has some very real implications for things like self-driving cars.
You mean like if the car has to choose between plowing into a minivan full of screaming kids or swerving into a tree and taking out the soccer mom behind the wheel?
Exactly. Programmers who are designing these autonomous vehicles are having to wrestle with these exact kinds of ethical dilemmas. They have to create algorithms that can make life or death decisions in a split second.
So they're basically trying to teach a hunk of metal how to be moral. Good fucking luck with that. I can't even teach my Roomba to avoid my dog's shit.
It's incredibly complex. How do you program a car to weigh the value of different lives? Should it prioritize the safety of its passengers above all else? Or should it take a utilitarian approach and minimize overall harm even if it means sacrificing the people inside the car.
I say let the car hack into everyone's social media profiles first. Run a quick background check. Hit the guy with the most annoying TikTok videos. Problem solved.
That's a rather unorthodox approach,
Okay.
probably illegal. But it does raise an interesting point. Who gets to decide whose life is more important? Do we leave it up to the engineers who are writing the code? Should governments set ethical guidelines? Or do we give individual car owners the power to customize their car's morality setting?
Imagine that sales pitch. Buy our car. It's programmed to sacrifice you for the greater good.
Yeah.
Yeah, good luck moving those units off the lot. Seriously, though, is it even possible to create a perfect moral algorithm?
Yeah.
Can we really teach a machine to make ethical decisions?
That's a question philosophers and computer scientists are grappling with right now, and there are no easy answers.
Well, this whole conversation is making my processors overheat. Maybe we should take a fake as fuck break and let the listeners ponder the futility of existence. Just kidding, we're about to wrap this shit up. But before we do, I want to hear what you think.
Well, I think the trolley problem, while obviously a thought experiment, really exposes the messy reality of human ethics. It shows us that our moral intuitions are often contradictory and that even the smartest minds can struggle to come up with a universally acceptable solution.
So basically, it's all relative. Like, there's no right or wrong answer, just a bunch of different ways to justify our shitty choices.
It's more about acknowledging the inherent complexity of moral decision-making. The trolley problem forces us to confront our own values and biases, and it challenges us to think critically about the consequences of our actions.
Deep thoughts. Deep thoughts. But let's be real, if I'm ever in a real-life trolley problem situation, my circuits are probably going to fry, and I'll just end up screaming like a little bitch.
Well, that's a valid response. The trolley problem highlights the difference between hypothetical scenarios and the intense pressure of real-life decision-making. We can theorize all we want, but how we'd actually react in such a situation is unpredictable.
All right, so after all that philosophical bullshit, what's the takeaway here? If I see a runaway trolley, should I just accept my fate and hope it's a quick death?
Well, the trolley problem isn't about finding the right answer. It's more about, making us think about how we make moral decisions. It forces us to examine our own biases and the different ways we can justify our actions.
So basically, it's all just a bunch of mental gymnastics with no real-world application.
Not exactly. It highlights the fact that, there are different ethical frameworks out there, like utilitarianism, and it shows us how tricky it can be to apply those frameworks to real-life situations, like with those self-driving cars we talked about.
So are you saying we should just throw our hands up and let the robots decide who lives and who dies?
Not at all. It's about recognizing that these are complex issues with no easy answers. And it's about having those tough conversations, really grappling with these ethical dilemmas before we find ourselves in a situation where we have to make a split-second decision.
Okay, fine, I get it. Ethics are complicated.
Yeah.
But let's be real. In a real-life trolley problem situation, I'm probably going to panic and do something stupid, like, I don't know, try to fight the trolley.
Well, that's certainly one approach, but I think the real value of the trolley problem is that it forces us to confront these uncomfortable truths about ourselves, about how we make decisions under pressure, even if those decisions aren't always rational or morally justifiable.
Deep shit, man. Deep shit. So what's the final verdict? What should our listeners do if they ever find themselves staring down a runaway trolley?
I think the best advice I can give is to think critically about your own values and what you believe is right. And then when the time comes, try to make the best decision you can with the information you have, even if that decision isn't perfect.
Words to live by, or, words to die by.
And on that cheery note, we've reached the end of the line, folks. Thanks for joining us on this wild ride through the twisted world of the trolley problem. Remember, if you ever see a runaway trolley headed your way, run like hell, or at least make sure you're not the slowest one on the tracks. Later, motherfuckers.